Hi, I'm Wayne Mullins, and welcome to my brief introduction to Scrum Agile development. With this brief presentation, I want to introduce you to Agile software development using the Scrum methodology, as is used at several software development companies in my area. According to the Scrum Alliance, Scrum is the leading software development methodology in the country today. It was codified by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber in 1995. It is a form of Agile, some people say rapid prototype development. It stresses breaking major development projects into smaller and smaller pieces and completing each small piece using a dedicated Scrum team. Now, at this point, you may ask where the term Scrum comes from. Well, in rugby football, the term Scrum is used when a group of players work together in a total effort for a short period of time for an incremental gain. This metaphor fits this development methodology and therefore was applied. A traditional company development process, sometimes called a waterfall process, does extensive planning, documentation, and contract negotiation up front. The idea is to get everything well defined before the first line of code is ever written. They then use the documentation to define when the product is acceptable and complete. They plan, design, and develop per the documentation and unit testing along the way. They do periodic integration testing to ensure the latest changes fit with the existing product. They repeat the above steps until everything passes integration testing before moving on to the next step. They then do release and validation tests against the documentation to ensure that all requirements are met, all changes are mapped to requirements, and all requirements are mapped to tests. This is referred to as traceability. Scrum methodology defines the concept of a Scrum team, where an organization may have several Scrum teams. A Scrum team consists of a team business manager who serves as the customer representative to the team and usually reports to management or marketing. A Scrum master, who is specially trained for the role, serves as team manager to monitor progress and works to remove obstacles from the development or test cycle. You have 2 to 4 developers who develop the work based upon provided use cases. So these are called user stories in Scrum terminology, using the team product manager to clarify requirements. You then have 1 to 2 testers who do user story validation and quasi-integration testing during the sprint. Team members are usually multi-qualified and can assume other team roles as needed to see that the sprint schedule is met. For example, you might have developers filling in for testers or testers filling in for developers if the team is behind schedule. The Scrum team then succeeds or fails as a team, not as individuals, and the team is responsible to no single manager, giving them freedom to conduct their team as needed to meet goals without outside interference. So what does a Scrum Agile solution look like? Well, the business manager will accept user stories, use cases if you will, as primary documentation. These then go into a Scrum backlog in business case priority order. Scrum teams then break user stories into small pieces that can be well defined and completed within a sprint cycle. Usually this is a 2-week period. Additional acceptance requirements are specified at this point. A user story piece then is given to a Scrum team that will develop and test the change during 1 sprint cycle. This is added to the team's backlog or schedule of things to do. At the beginning of each sprint, a Scrum team commits to complete some number of items from its backlog during the sprint and assigns story points, estimating the complexity of each task. At the end of the sprint, the completed changes are demonstrated to the customer or someone representing the customer's interest. The Scrum team does retrospective then on the sprint and considers steps for process improvement. Velocity, which is the average number of story points completed per sprint, is computed and is used for future development estimates. Finally, the cycle is repeated for the next set of user stories on the backlog. Agile Scrum does have advantages. It stresses working software over comprehensive documentation. It stresses customer collaboration over advanced planning and contract negotiation. It responds to and in fact embraces change during the development rather than strictly following a planned schedule. It's loved by most management because they have a better feel for the progress being made. It does have its disadvantages, however. There are lots of recommendations and techniques for conducting various stages of the process, which can be followed almost with a religious fervor. Also, development is very short-term focused. That leaves management as the only party to worry about long-term implications. Finally, like much of agile development, it causes intellectual debt, where development does less refactoring and other maintenance in the short term in an aim to meet a sprint goal. Management never seems to want to schedule work to repay intellectual debt. A graphic of the Scrum process is shown below. I hope you have enjoyed your introduction to the Scrum methodology.